game that was used for a lot of endgame builds. As pointed out here by Forbes, Marvel's Avengers destroyed its best perk, breaking endgame builds, and barely mentioned it. Scrolling down, you'll find details. Endgame builds in Marvel's Avengers have mostly centered on one perk, Tachyon Surge, which has previously boosted all damage by 50% when activated. Tachyon Surge has now not just been nerfed, but more or less destroyed. I don't think it even made it into the official patch notes post, only a brief mention on Discord somewhere. This is not just some trivial change. This is one that affects tons and tons of players during endgame, and they failed to communicate this change. Scrolling further down the article, Crystal Dynamics left the perk in its current state since its introduction nearly a year ago. So this wasn't an issue that they detected and fixed immediately. They left it there for people to exploit, to use, to make builds around. And so tons of players after all this time will have a build centered around this key perk that has now not just been nerfed but utterly annihilated. Players have spent the last 10 months or so farming for that perk specifically on their gear to make endgame builds. Builds that are now functionally useless, and there's no way to swap perks or anything like that in Avengers. So this literally screws over players who now have to rebuild their characters. Maybe a small-scale nerf would have been acceptable, but this renders the perk, which has been key to so many builds, utterly useless. That's pissed a lot of people off, and that's what preceded the current update that added the gameplay affecting microtransactions, the boosters and whatnot. That's now got the community pretty infuriated. There's been an utter lack of communication, and now we're delving into just outright lies and egregious breaking of very clear-cut promises. And so you've got loyal players posting stuff like, I no longer support this game. For the first time since this game launched, I no longer want to support it. And this is among the loyal players who's had a good time with this game and bought cosmetics because they wanted to support the developers and whatnot. But this is where they draw the line. This game doesn't have the luxury to do this when there's so much to be fixed. So much. And that's another thing. What I've covered in terms of issues with Marvel's Avengers is probably scratching the surface. No doubt if you ask a Marvel's Avengers player who's been with the game for a long time, they'll tell you even more issues that I have yet to discuss. And so for Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics to come out with an update like this during these tumultuous times, and I mean, let's face it, it's been tumultuous times for this game since launch. For them to do this, it is a punch to the balls after a slap to the face. Here's another Reddit user who expressed their umbrage against the game in its latest update, and the sequence of events that paint an egregious picture when it comes to Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics' intentions on how and why the XP boosters will implemented. The post reads, why selling XP boosters feels greasy to me. 1, they nerfed XP because players are getting overwhelmed, which we all know is BS. 2, start offering double XP months and quadruple XP weekends when you told your players that they were getting overwhelmed, which straight up proves that what they said previously about overwhelming players is utter BS. And finally, they did this after the launch of Game Pass, which launched alongside a 4 times XP weekend. And then after all that was over, after the XP buff is over with, they start offering the XP buffs via the marketplace. They start monetizing it after all that's died down, all to take advantage of new players following the surge of the player base with the Game Pass release. So this post back here about the XP rework and pacing issues and how it's confusing and overwhelming to newer players. We now know, of course, the real reason, the reason everyone knew back then why they did this, the potential and possibility of monetizing XP boosters so players have to buy the solution to an issue that the developers and the publisher intentionally introduced to this game. That's microtransactions in a nutshell. You're not getting more, you're just paying for things that were stripped on purpose. And there are complaints across a number of outlets. Reset Era, the forum, also has people complaining about how after promising that this wouldn't happen, this has happened. And this post notes another promise that has gone unfulfilled. For those who do not know, they removed the in-game earnable cosmetics with a promise that they will be reintroduced in the future with a revamp. That was like 6 months ago at this point, and no news what that revamp is. And at this point, enough promises have been broken that this user now expects that loot boxes might come along and be a part of this cosmetic rework, and they'll start monetizing cosmetics that way. Who knows anymore? They promised back in E3 2019 no loot boxes. They also promised cosmetics only microtransactions. They didn't fulfill that promise, so at this point, it's impossible to believe anything that marketing has ever said. So yeah, loot boxes may very well come, despite past promises. If the goal is to kill off what little loyalty is left from what little is left from the community, then congratulations, Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics. You're doing a great job at that with how you're handling this game post-launch during a time period when this game needs to be more consumer-friendly than ever and needs to find ways to attract players if it doesn't wish to die off in an unceremonious manner. And I'll be honest with you, this game seems to be well on its way to become the next Anthem. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the current state of Marvel's Avengers and the introduction of gameplay affecting microtransactions such as XP boosters. Share your thoughts below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.
You should run. Last player standing. Spike planted. Pardon their vision. Still in sight.
Move in after I strike. That's when they're weak.
Right here. I am everywhere. I am the hunter!
Revealing area. There they are. Enemy spotted A.
Your duty is not over.
That's dead.
Idiot.
Time to jump.
Spike planted. standing. Last round in the half.
We cannot keep our goods after this. Spend all.
I am not just a shadow.
Barrier here.
Cutting through. Reloading. Decoy.
Still in sight. Enemy spotted A. Reloading. Spike down A.
Jet
Reloading.
grounded.
Enemy spotted A.
One enemy remaining. Switching
Time to stop
sides.